If you've ever tried to take a comprehensive mindfulness program like MBSR or MBCT, it can sometimes be difficult finding one close by and accessible. Hi, my name is Ted Meissner. Welcome to Mindfulness Voyage. And today we're going to be talking about research of live online and self-paced online mindfulness for those with cancer. Please do remember to tap that subscribe button, as it does help people to find these episodes. And let's get started. Our guest today is Nasim Badaghi. Welcome to the podcast. I am so glad you could be here.
Hi, Ted. Thanks so much for inviting me. I am very excited to be here.
Good. I'm glad you could be here. And there's so many things that I want to ask about this particular research that we're going to be talking about today. But before we get into that, maybe you could say just a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Right. Who am I? In simple terms, I would say I am a researcher and mindfulness teacher. So, for the past years, I've been doing research on online mindfulness based cognitive therapy for people with cancer, and then teaching mindfulness courses for PhD students at researchers at Radboud University Medical Center in Nijmegen, the Netherlands. That's a snippet of myself, I would say. Um, yeah, I guess that's it.
That's a good overview. That gives us an idea of where you are and what you're doing. And I want us to really dive into this research because there's so many different layers to it. It's for people with cancer, it's
Right.
online and different kinds of that. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about what was the structure of this study and why did you want to do this particular research?
Right. So, in terms of, I would start with why we did the research. I think always having the cause is good. But in this case, it was driven by previous research, actually. So, in our center, we had some evidence of unguided therapist assisted mindfulness based cognitive therapy for people with cancer compared to care as usual. And we saw that that was quite effective, but there were still some limitations. Like dropout was quite high. Also, people would have liked to have more group or support with the teacher, with the trainer. So we thought, okay, this seems to be working, but still there's a lot of room for improvement. And that's why we said, okay, let's try to do better. Let's try to make this program something better and offer it to people. Also, in a more, what's the word? In a more scalable way. So make it as accessible as possible as well. That in terms of why potentially, um, and then the structure. So I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly, but would you mean the structure of the study itself?
Yeah, you had three arms, for
Right.
example, that may be talking about that.
Okay, yeah, that okay, then we go. Yeah, so the study was a three-arm randomized control trial. So we divided people in a group blended online MBCT program, a individual unguided one, and care as usual. So that was, let's say, the main division. Then people completed the intervention. Of course, they were randomized, completed the intervention. They completed questionnaires at mid intervention. So 5 weeks through the training, they had mid intervention questionnaires. After the intervention, then 3 months after, then 6 months after, and then 9 months after. Something interesting about this particular study, I would say, is that the cohort in care as usual was re-randomized, and they also follow up. Not follow up. They also follow either of the two intervention conditions, and then completed also the follow up assessment. Yeah.
So this is so fascinating to me because you're covering not just we've got our treatment as usual, whatever
Right.
that happens to be for a particular intervention, as well as and here's our mindfulness thing, but two different varieties of mindfulness
Right.
with a group. And individual. And I wonder if you could say just a little bit about the what was the difference between those two? What does that mean in practice?
Right. So both of the sessions were completely online, so there is no face-to-face contact at all. Physical contact, sorry, physical contact at all. Then the group blended condition consisted of four online sessions. So sessions 1, 3, 5, and 8 were guided by a mindfulness teacher, and people would follow it in a Zoom session like we are right now, so a virtual thing. And then people in the individual and guided completed all of the sessions completely by themselves, so via an app, or they could also log in their computer on the website and then follow the program per module. So per session, each week the session would open and then they could follow it. They had, as a mindfulness teacher, let's say an avatar who would guide them through the course, but it was nothing similar like what a mindfulness teacher would do. I have to say that, of course. Content wise, both interventions were exactly the same. Of course, the format was different. Was different. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I'm really interested for us to talk about is what the results were that you saw, and in particularly around dropout rates and how
Oh,
those compare between the groups, because that was one of the most interesting things for me. But what were some of the results that you found?
okay. So the main result, for what the study was powered, for people that are maybe interested in that. Um, so the study was powered for a comparison between the group blended and care as usual, the individual and guided and care as usual. So this was a non-superiority trial. So we could not really compare group blended with the individual and guided. So we cannot say the group is better than the completely standalone version. So that's one thing. But what we found, um, was that people in the in the group blended condition had lower levels of psychological distress immediately after they follow the intervention, and also at 3 months follow up. However, people in the individual unguided did not have significant levels, like a significant reduction of psychological distress at post treatment, but the effects were significant at follow up. So, in simple terms, of course, there was a reduction at post treatment, but it was not significant compared to care as usual, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was main result. Then, when we looked at secondary outcomes, we also saw another bunch of positive effects. So we also saw that people in the group blended condition, they also had lower levels of rumination, increased levels of mindfulness skills, self-compassion, similar to the individual unguided. However, for them, self-compassion was not significant. That up to 3 months follow up. So here I'm talking about when results are with the care as usual condition. Because as I mentioned before, we also um, had follow up assessments up to 9 months. However, there was not a care as usual condition. So results are basically within groups from baseline to the last follow up. So any change is, we cannot compare it to something else, but within what was going on there, let's say. And in that regard, then we did see significant effects up to 9 months in both intervention conditions for multiple outcomes. So we saw reductions in psychological distress, fatigue, fear of cancer recurrence, rumination, and increases on self compassion, mindfulness skills, well being, and decentering as well. So in that way, I would say, yeah, it was great to see these results. I mean, to see at least there people are benefiting somehow from following an app. Let's put it in simple terms, a mindfulness app. Those were the main, I would say, significant results. I don't know if you want. I should elaborate a bit more on the rest.
Yeah, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that in terms, especially in terms of these were not just for a week or two afterwards. This is
Right,
follow up
right,
for months afterwards. And
right.
for those who may have only been a participant or you're a teacher and you only do things in person and you've always thought of online as lesser, here again, we
Mm,
see more evidence that it's
yeah.
different, yes, but maybe not lesser. So, yeah, if you could speak a little bit more about some of those results, please.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, indeed, we saw that we did see that people benefited in the long term. And what was for me amazing to see was that yes, like all in all, we see that people are benefiting from the online intervention, and also that effect sizes. Again, I have to repeat myself, even though it was not with a care as usual condition, effect sizes, at least for psychological distress, were moderate to large at follow up, which also for me, and when we've discussed in our team, this potentially raises the notion or the idea that these mindfulness courses do take some time to develop and integrate, right? But also they are sustained. And now we see also that if they are individually followed or without a mindfulness teacher or a group, it seems that the core or the component of the mindfulness itself alone is somehow strong enough that if people follow it by themselves, then it is also beneficial. And interestingly, um, in the long term as well, like we do not see, I mean, again, this is not direct comparison, but looking at the graphs, when I look at the graphs, there's not much difference between the group blended and the individual unguided. So it seems that both are benefiting. I cannot say statistically speaking equally, but I do see benefits.
Yeah. Now, one
um,
of the things that I
yeah.
wanted to ask about with this, we mentioned earlier, is around dropout rates. And the
Oh
reason
yeah.
I ask about that is
Mm,
one of the challenges with self-paced is that in
yeah.
other programs I'm aware of, dropout rates tend to be fairly high. I typically see around 80% or more dropout rates. You didn't have
Right.
that here. And two things come to mind. First is, why didn't they drop out? How was it that you had so many people finishing? And that has a direct impact on outcomes because if people drop out, they don't actually get those benefits. So completion rates matter. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So first, I have to say that the group blended condition was more appealing, at least to people, because we only see a dropout of 15% when mixing the first randomization with the like the first with the second cohort, and then in the individual unguided condition, sadly, we did see up to 40% dropout, which is a significant number. We did investigate moderators of dropout. So we searched for many different variables. We thought, okay, perhaps sex, age, education, either the different levels of baseline psychological distress or these baseline characteristics. But we didn't find something that would explain dropout for both intervention conditions. But something very, very interesting is that we did find that for the group blended condition, psychological distress seemed to be a moderator of dropout, meaning that people who were more distressed at the beginning of the session drop out at the beginning of the whole course, sorry, drop out more than people who were less distressed. This was for the group blended condition. However, this did not happen in the individual unguided, which to me raises a big question mark. And I mean, we do not have a solid answer. I don't have a solid answer for that, just some speculation. Um, but potentially, what I think is if the group is too confronting, it may be too much for the people that are in the group, right? If you are already with high levels of stress and then forced, quote unquote, to face strong emotions and feelings and then being confronted with a group may be too much, rather than if you can do it alone at your own time and feel like, okay, this week I don't feel like doing it, I do it next one, or I don't want to think about this right now, I follow it next time. So sort of regulated yourself a bit more. That may be one of the reasons. However, another reason that I may think is that, of course, people in the group blended had to attend a group session. And if they may have felt too ill or too sick because of whatever reason, then they would just stop doing that, right? So that could also explain that. But again, we did not investigate this, so I cannot know for sure what the reason is.
But it does show something very interesting, this close tie between scale, number of people who can go through a
Right.
program, and accessibility. And particularly
Complete.
when you're going through the emotional distress of cancer treatments and everything that's involved with that, is that being able to either be in a supportive group is more helpful to you, or for some, it may be doing this on my own is a way to scale this better based on those unique needs. So I'm curious what some of your thoughts are about that why, and what are some other interesting things you'd like to keep researching about this?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So first, I think that both are connected, like just both of the questions. Um, and I would answer in a way in which, first, I would like very much to still research. We didn't search for personality traits, for instance, or we didn't do any qualitative interview or something that perhaps our questioners are not showing. So it would have been great if we could have asked people, particularly, yeah, the people that left or that didn't participate, like, why is it that, what made you stop, basically. But then in terms of, again, something that I think it's great is just what you mentioned now about scalability, because some people may not be able to afford a group blended condition where you need to involve a mindfulness teacher, a group, and of course it involves more resources. The individual and guided may be way easier to access or to pay. And here now we are actually working on implementing both of the intervention conditions in the Netherlands. So we are trying to make the individual and guided accessible to as many people as possible. So just like, roll it out and put it out there in the platform here in the Dutch platform, so people can just access at a very low or zero cost. And for the group blended, we are now trying to make a sustainable implementation as well. So creating a network of potentially trained mindfulness teachers, also trained not only in cancer and mindfulness, but also in online, and be able to use the program and to give online feedback. And yeah, so I think that research, in my eyes, for this particular um, program has to go towards implementation, like really make it accessible at this point. Of course, I would love to see what are the mechanisms behind. I would love to understand more about moderators. It would be great as well, if we could see something that what is happening in the brain, and this more neuropsychological or neuroscientific, yeah, research. But I do think that the main focus has to go towards implementation to help people. Like, we know that these programs are effective. There's years of research now on mindfulness based interventions for people with cancer and online mindfulness based interventions for people with cancer. So again, I repeat myself, yeah, I think we have to just give this out. And another thing that I would like to add is that very often, and we also saw in our studies, that our population consisted mostly of Dutch highly educated female women, not female, yeah, female participants with breast cancer. um, so I would be very much interested also in making this a bit more accessible to other samples, to other people, and see, okay, is this also as good as we see for the current sample? Yeah.
Yeah, this is such an important aspect. The accessibility, again,
Yeah.
is it's one thing to build a program that people can't afford to do, and cost wise,
Yeah,
or time
completely.
wise, or commitment wise. And it's another to have something that people can actually participate in that takes into account cost, time, medical conditions, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, yeah. And if I may add something as well, is that we also we conducted a meta analysis on positive health outcomes. So this was about, okay, do mindfulness based interventions help not only in reducing psychological distress, fatigue, then let's say then symptoms, but if they also help people with cancer flourish a bit more. And surprisingly, we perhaps not that surprisingly, but we did also find, um, yeah, benefits. And this was a meta-analysis with like I don't remember the exact number, but 4,000 people with cancer on 46 RCTs. And we saw that people seem to also benefit on multiple positive health outcomes. So for example, again, mindfulness skills, self compassion, but also coping, social support, well being, personal growth, spirituality. So, this to me says or says that, yeah, mindfulness can definitely help to cope with the illness, but also to just help people live a more meaningful, potentially, and better life regardless. And something that, again, this is my opinion. If it's not cancer, it may be something else. If it's cancer today but tomorrow is, I don't know, the loss of a loved one, or I get cured of breast cancer and then tomorrow I lose my job, or someone else is ill. So it's just like there are so many things happening. And what I find great about mindfulness based intervention, generally speaking, is that it offers people tools to cope, in this case, yes, with cancer, but also for life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautifully said. And for those who are watching or listening, however you're finding this podcast, I do have some links both to the research that we're talking about and to our guest today, Nasim Badaghi. Nasim,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate your time.
No, thank you, Ted, for you. It has been a pleasure, and thanks so much for opening the space to share these results with everyone who listens.
Thank you for tuning in today, and to Nasim for all of your time and your insights that you've shared. It's so important to understand for those of us who are mindfulness professionals that live online, or perhaps even self-paced online, is not lesser than in-person training and can help with people in their accessibility to mindfulness. Remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can, and I'll see you again soon on Mindfulness Voyage.